Welcome back to Superbly Said Advanced English Vocabulary and Phrases.
Glad to be here.
And just a quick reminder right at the top that this content comes directly from a SpeakDuo lesson.
Right.
So you can head over to SpeakDuo.com to meet new people from around the world. It's a great place to practice English on video calls and really build up your speaking confidence.
Highly recommend it.
Yeah, it's fantastic. But we are jumping straight into things today. We have some carefully selected idioms specifically for advanced English learners.
Yes, we do.
And we are focusing right on the modern workplace obstacle course. You know that feeling when you're staring at your screen, your inbox is totally exploding, and your brain just hits an absolute brick wall.
Oh, I know that feeling very well. It's so common.
Right. So today, we aren't just memorizing definitions. We are giving you the exact linguistic toolkit you need to actually survive that kind of professional chaos.
Which is such a critical toolkit to have, honestly, because these are the highly specific phrases that really separate an intermediate speaker from someone who, truly commands the nuances of the language.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Right, because when you can articulate exactly how a project is failing or, alternatively, why an idea is succeeding, you actually change how people perceive your competence.
I mean, I have absolutely been in situations where I just didn't have the right words to explain why I was stuck.
And that's frustrating.
It really is. It just made me look less capable to my boss.
Yeah.
So let's start right there with that awful feeling of hitting a wall. The first phrase we have is stymied by.
Yeah, stymied by. So it essentially means to be completely blocked or just unable to figure out what to do next.
Okay.
But we really need to look at the underlying mechanics of this word. Specifically, the distinction between being stymied by something and merely being confused by it.
Okay, so there's a difference.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I use those interchangeably.
A lot of people do. But, confusion is really just a friction point. It slows you down.
Right.
If you are confused, you might need to reread a really dense document or maybe ask a colleague a clarifying question. But your momentum hasn't reached zero. You're still moving forward, just slower.
Okay, I see. So it's kind of like the difference between hitting a speed bump and just driving straight into a dead end.
That is a perfect analogy, yeah.
So when you're confused, you tap the brakes. But when you are stymied by something, you are fully in park. The engine is off.
Exactly. Being stymied means you've hit a complete structural brick wall. You just cannot move forward without a significant intervention.
Man, and that is a really frustrating place to be, especially if you have to explain that delay to your boss.
It is, but that is exactly where the psychology of this phrase is so useful for you to learn.
How do you mean?
Well, if a project comes to a dead halt and you tell your manager, I was confused, it sounds like an internal failing, right?
True. It sounds like you just didn't understand the assignment.
Exactly. But if you use the language from our source material and say, I was completely stymied by the unexpected security firewall error and had to consult external IT documentation before I could finish the report.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that frames the problem completely differently.
It does.
It shifts the blame to the structure of the problem, not your own competence.
Precisely. It communicates that some external force halted your progress. It saves face while communicating that you needed an intervention to keep going.
That is such a good tip.
Right.
But let's imagine you do get past that block.
Okay.
You consult the IT documentation, you bypass the firewall, the dam finally breaks, and suddenly every single delayed email hits you at the exact same time.
The floodgates open.
Yes. That brings us to our next phrase, which I feel perfectly captures that visceral panic, and that is, barraged me.
Ah, yes, barraged me. So this describes being overwhelmed with an intense, relentless flood of words, messages, or pressure.
It sounds so aggressive.
It is, and the etymology here is key. It actually comes directly from military terminology. Yeah, a barrage is a concentrated artillery bombardment.
I mean, I have to admit, using military terms for a standard office job always feels a little dramatic to me.
It does sound intense.
Right. Like, is there a reason we don't just say, someone contacted me or asked me for something? Why do we have to go to war over an email chain?
Well, because the modern workplace often triggers those exact same fight-or-flight nervous system responses.
Oh, that's a fair point.
Yeah. Contacted me is entirely neutral. It's just a simple, manageable transaction of information. But if you say someone barraged me, you're communicating volume and a total lack of agency.
So you're just passively receiving this unmanageable amount of pressure.
Exactly. You aren't just receiving emails, you are under attack by them.
That makes total sense when you frame it around the nervous system.
Yeah.
Like, think about a situation where you might have to answer an IELTS speaking part 2 prompt about a stressful day at work.
Sure.
You could say, immediately following the controversial film announcement, journalists barraged me with constant interview requests.
That's a great example.
You can literally feel the exhaustion in that sentence, like
Yeah.
you're just trying to block it all out.
You really can. It paints a very vivid picture of someone, throwing their hands up to shield themselves from this flood of inquiries.
Which naturally leads to the next problem, right? You've been stymied, you bypassed the block, you've been barraged by a flood of catch-up work, and now you have to figure out how to manage all that chaos.
Yes, you need triage. You simply cannot do everything at once without burning out entirely.
Exactly. And that brings us to the phrase, on a simmer.
On a simmer. I love this one. To keep a project on a simmer means it is kept at a low, controlled level of intensity.
Right.
It's not fully off, but it is certainly not fully on either.
The culinary analogy here is just brilliant.
It really is.
Because if you have a pot of boiling water, it's violent, right? It requires your full attention. Or it's going to boil over and make a massive mess all over the stove.
Yes, exactly.
But a simmer is gentle. It just keeps the soup warm. It's developing flavor in the background. But it doesn't need you to stand over the stove constantly stirring it.
It's the perfect metaphor. It really highlights the critical nuance between keeping something on a simmer versus, say, putting a project on hold.
Oh, yeah. What is the distinction there?
Well, if you put a project on hold, you've turned the stove off completely. The heat is gone. The work has just stopped entirely.
Right, it's dead in the water for now.
Exactly. But if a project is on a simmer, it remains active. It's just requiring minimal immediate attention while it develops organically.
There is a psychological comfort in that, too, I think. You haven't abandoned the idea. You are just strategically prioritizing.
Precisely.
So, in a workplace conversation with a colleague, you might say, while waiting for final funding approval, I kept the independent film project on a simmer, occasionally refining the script on weekends.
That is a perfect use case. It shows real maturity in how you manage your workflow and your boundaries.
Okay, so managing the flow of tasks is one thing, but how do we process the actual information inside those tasks?
That's the next step.
Because once you survive that overwhelming barrage of data, you have to somehow extract the actual value from all that noise and, turn it into actionable ideas.
Right. And the first tool in our advanced vocabulary toolkit for this process is gleaned from.
Gleaned from, okay.
You have gleaned from a source means you have gathered or learned something valuable piece by painstaking piece.
See, my instinct here is to just say, I downloaded the information, or maybe that I memorized the report. Why is gleaned from a better choice?
Well, because downloaded implies a bulk, indiscriminate transfer.
Okay.
It's like you took a whole massive document and just dropped it onto your hard drive. There's no filtering involved in downloading. But the word glean originally comes from agriculture.
Wait, really?
Yeah. It meant picking up the leftover grains of wheat after the main harvest. So it's a laborious, careful process.
That is fascinating.
So when you say you gleaned information, it implies you used heavy discernment. You extracted small, highly valuable nuggets of wisdom from a really large, maybe messy pile of data.
So it's like you're sifting through tons of dirt just to find, 1 ounce of gold.
Exactly, sifting the dirt for gold. So in a professional setting, presenting your findings by saying the valuable insights regarding modern market trends were gleaned from months of intensive consumer behavior surveys, that completely changes how your audience views your work.
Yeah, I can hear that. It tells them you didn't just skim an executive summary. You actually did the heavy lifting of synthesizing the raw data yourself.
Precisely.
Okay, so you've gleaned these valuable insights. You found the gold. What do you do with it next? You have to grab it.
Yes.
Which brings us to our next phrase, latched onto.
When you latch onto something, you grab hold of it and adopt that idea or habit very firmly.
I actually want to challenge this one a little bit.
Oh, go ahead.
The phrase just sounds almost desperate to me, like someone grabbing a life preserver. Can this be negative, like latching on to a really bad excuse and just refusing to let it go?
Oh, absolutely. That is a very astute observation. You can definitely latch onto a negative narrative or a toxic relationship or a really poor business strategy.
Right.
But if we look at our source material for advanced learners, the focus here is primarily on the positive strategic adoption of an idea.
Okay, I'm with you.
The core nuance to understand is how it compares to simply saying you agreed with an idea.
Oh, I see. Because if I agree with a colleague's idea, I might just nod my head in a Tuesday morning meeting, and then by lunchtime, I've completely forgotten about it.
Exactly. The difference is the enthusiasm and the permanence. When you latch onto something, it becomes a core foundational part of your strategy.
It's an active integration.
Yes. So imagine you are pitching a new direction to a client, explaining a recent creative success. You would say, once the creative director latched onto the minimalist aesthetic concept, the entire marketing campaign was redesigned around it.
Oh, wow. The idea didn't just survive the meeting, it took total root.
It became the foundation, yeah.
And what fascinates me is that sometimes when an idea takes root like that, it outgrows its original container entirely.
It does.
It becomes something totally new, which perfectly captures our next phrase, spun off.
Spun off. This refers to something being twisted, distorted, or taken in a completely different direction.
Right.
In a corporate or creative context, it describes a small idea generating a whole new independent entity.
So it's not just a fancy way of saying action A resulted in outcome B.
No, not at all. Resulted in is far too linear. It's too predictable. A spin-off has a life of its own. It departs from the original source material and charts an unexpected path.
So if you were answering an IELTS question about a television show you enjoy, you could say, what started as a minor comedic secondary character eventually spun off into its own critically acclaimed television series.
A perfect example. Because the character didn't just result in more screen time on the same show, they created a totally new universe.
They took that original concept in a totally independent direction.
Exactly.
All right, let's pivot slightly here. We've talked about how ideas evolve. Let's look at how we as professionals evolve in the public eye.
Okay, external perceptions.
Right, specifically how we deal with criticism.
Huh.
This is where the phrase clapping back comes into play.
Clapping back. This is a wonderfully vivid modern phrase. It means responding sharply and publicly to criticism or an unfair comment.
Okay, let me test this. If a client sends me a rude email and I reply with a polite but firm clarification, am I clapping back?
No, you are merely defending yourself.
Okay, what's the missing ingredient?
The defining characteristic of clapping back is the public, sharp, and witty nature of the defense. It is aimed at decisively shutting down unmerited criticism in a forum where an audience can witness it.
Oh, so it's a performance.
This is very much a performance.
That's like a perfect tennis return smash against a really weak serve.
Yeah.
The opponent lobs this unfair criticism over the net, and you just absolutely smash it back down the line for a point while the whole stadium cheers.
That's the exact dynamic. It is very commonly used when discussing public figures navigating media scrutiny.
Right.
So, if you were describing a celebrity in the news, you might say, tired of enduring continuous, unmerited public criticism from industry pundits, the actress started clapping back with factual rebuttals on social media.
And by doing that, she isn't just defending herself in private. She is aggressively reclaiming the narrative for everyone to see.
Exactly.
But of course, navigating public perception and building a career takes time. Success isn't always immediate, and society puts so much pressure on us to be like prodigies right out of the gate.
It really does.
Which leads us to a phrase I actually find incredibly comforting. Late bloomer.
A late bloomer. This is someone who achieves significant success or discovers a profound talent much later in life than expected.
This just feels so much kinder than the alternatives. You would never call a late bloomer a slow learner, would you?
You certainly wouldn't, because they describe entirely different mechanisms.
Right.
A slow learner is someone struggling to comprehend information. But a late bloomer, they aren't failing. They are simply operating on a delayed timeline.
I love that distinction.
And this raises an important philosophical point about how we measure success. When a late bloomer finally does blossom, their success is often profound, durable, and undeniable.
They just required a longer incubation period.
Exactly.
So in a workplace context, you might be discussing an employee's unusual career trajectory. You could say, admittedly, despite struggling in her early 20s, she proved to be a late bloomer who eventually became the company's most successful executive.
That is a profound testament to endurance. It acknowledges the initial delay without diminishing the sheer scale of the ultimate achievement.
Well, we have covered an immense amount of linguistic ground today.
We certainly have.
And now it is time to see what actually latched on for you, the listener. It is time for the Advanced Learner's Vocabulary Quiz.
The best part, knowledge only becomes mastery when it is actively tested and applied.
Exactly. So for everyone listening and playing along at home, here are the rules. I'm going to read a prompt asking which sentence uses our target phrase correctly, followed by options A, B, and C.
Nice and simple.
Right. And I'll read the phrase frequently so you don't lose track of what we're guessing. Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer after I read the options. Then, the expert will immediately break down the correct answer. You ready?
I'm ready. Let's test those nuances.
All right, question 1. Which sentence uses the idiomatic phrase stymied by correctly based on context? We are looking for stymied by. Option A, the professional landscaping gardener was instructed to be stymied by the lawnmower during the grass trimming session. Option B, the deeply frustrated young retail clerk aggressively managed to completely drop a white line. Or option C, completely stymied by the unexpected security firewall error, the senior network engineer had to consult external documentation. Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
All right, the correct answer for stymied by is option C. Completely stymied by the unexpected security firewall error. Remember, stymied by means hitting a physical or metaphorical brick wall where progress halts entirely, just like that IT firewall example we discussed.
Right, that dead end.
Ah.
Okay, question 2. Select the context where the phrase clapping back is most appropriately used figuratively. We're looking for clapping back. Option A, tired of enduring continuous unmerited public criticism from industry pundits, the actor started clapping back with factual rebuttals on social media.
Okay.
Option B, the professional physical rehabilitation sports therapist was instructed to practice clapping back during the hand-eye coordination drill. Or option C, the incredibly clumsy warehouse inventory clerk accidentally managed to quickly buy some large systems. Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
The answer is option A. Tired of enduring continuous unmerited public criticism, the actress started clapping back. Option B is literal physical clapping, but our figurative idiom refers to that sharp public defense against unfair comments, that perfect tennis smash.
Makes total sense. Moving to question 3. In which situation does someone accurately utilize the advanced phrase gleaned from contextually? Remember, gleaned from. Option A, the professional agricultural farming crop gleaner was instructed to glean from the wheat field during the harvest.
A bit literal there.
Right. Option B, the valuable insights regarding modern market trends were gleaned from months of intensive consumer behavior surveys. Or option C, the completely terrified young wilderness traveler unexpectedly noticed an exceptionally massive, heavy tool chest. Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
That would be option B. The valuable insights were gleaned from months of intensive surveys. Option A is the literal agricultural origin, but figuratively, glean from requires that laborious, piece-by-piece extraction of valuable data, sifting the dirt for gold.
Excellent. Question 4. Which response best demonstrates the advanced phrase latched onto? Latched onto. Option A, once the creative director latched onto the minimalist aesthetic concept, the entire marketing campaign was redesigned around it. Option B, the professional nautical sailing deckhand was instructed to latch onto the mooring rope during the ship docking. Or option C, the incredibly clumsy warehouse inventory clerk accidentally managed to quickly catch that white balance. Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
The correct choice is option A. Once the creative director latched on to the minimalist aesthetic concept, option B is just literally grabbing a rope. Option A shows the firm, enthusiastic adoption of a new idea, making it a core part of the strategy.
We are halfway through the quiz. Question 5. How would a professional accurately use the phrase barraged me contextually? Again, barraged me. Option A, the professional military artillery defense commander was instructed to barrage me during the tactical combat simulation.
Right.
Option B, the completely confused amateur theater group unexpectedly decided to proudly paint a clean frame. Or option C, immediately following the controversial film announcement, journalists barraged me with constant interview requests and media inquiries. Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
The answer is option C. Journalists barraged me with constant interview requests. Option A is too literal with the military context. Option C perfectly captures that passive reception of a relentless, unmanageable flood of communication.
The floodgates opening, exactly. Okay, question 6. Which scenario perfectly illustrates the meaning of the phrase spun off contextually? Looking for spun off. Option A, the professional stunt driving race instructor was instructed to practice spun off on the skid pad.
Tricky.
Option B, what started as a minor comedic secondary character eventually spun off into its own critically acclaimed television series. Or option C, The incredibly clumsy hotel maintenance worker accidentally managed to completely drop that red tray. Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
That is option B. The minor character eventually spun off into its own series. Advanced learners often fall for literal physical traps, like cars spinning off tracks. Figuratively, a spin-off takes an idea in a completely new, independent direction.
Question 7. Which sentence accurately utilizes the advanced phrase on a simmer? Contextually, we are looking for on a simmer. Option A, while waiting for final funding approval, she kept the independent film project on a simmer, occasionally refining the script.
Good one.
Option B, the professional culinary soup preparation chef was instructed to keep the broth on a simmer during the kitchen shift. Or option C, the deeply confused young kitchen assistant accidentally managed to quickly slice a fresh piece of simmer. Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
The answer is option A. She kept the independent film project on a simmer. Option B is literally true in a kitchen, but option A is our figurative workplace metaphor, keeping a project low-key and active in the background rather than fully hitting pause.
Last one, bring it home. Question 8. Which of the following statements correctly uses late bloomer contextually? We want late bloomer. Option A, the professional botanical gardening greenhouse technician was instructed to check the late bloomer during the spring floral inventory.
Literal again.
Right. Option B, admittedly, despite struggling in her early 20s, she proved to be a late bloomer who eventually became the company's most successful executive. Or, option C, the employee arrived a late bloomer to the morning meeting and missed the presentation. Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
The final answer is option B. She proved to be a late bloomer who eventually became the company's most successful executive. Option A refers to literal botany, and option C just means someone was tardy. Option B beautifully illustrates someone achieving profound success on a delayed timeline.
And there we have it. Massive congratulations to you listening for expanding your advanced vocabulary today. You navigated the obstacle course, you dodged the literal translation traps, and you came out stronger on the other side.
Absolutely. But before we wrap up entirely, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over.
Oh, please do.
Language doesn't merely describe our world, it actually constructs how we perceive our challenges. Think deeply about the words we dissected today. If you reframe a moment of being completely stymied, not as a permanent personal failure, but simply as an external obstacle where you just haven't gleaned the right information to move forward yet, how might that alter your entire approach?
That is fascinating.
Right. By consciously changing the vocabulary you use internally, you might just revolutionize your strategy for the next massive problem you face at work.
I love that perspective. Words have immense power, not just when we speak them in a boardroom to others, but when we whisper them to ourselves in moments of stress.
Very true.
I encourage you to take that thought into your next difficult conversation and, maybe try keeping your frustrations on a simmer instead of letting them boil over. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We will see you next time.